Literally, if most people spent the same amount of money on Apple stock that they spent on Apple iPhones, most of you would be rich, and the racial wealth gap would not exist in your household. One thing about the racial wealth gap that's important to understand is that the gap ain't the same for everybody, right? The gap ain't gapping for everybody. Everybody ain't a victim, right? So even though there are victims, victims are real, right? So we're not going to pretend like there aren't victims and not hear their story. Just know everybody ain't no victim. Like I hope y'all understand that. I hope you understand that. Like when they say things like, you ever hear that stat where they say that black wealth is going to decline to zero by 2053? Anybody heard that stat? Well, that stat is not, that doesn't apply to everybody. Every statistic has what you refer to as variation, meaning that you might have an average, but you really have an average of averages. And every average has a standard deviation, which means, but what that basically means is that for some people it's going to happen, and for some people it won't. The median is the middle person. The median is like if you have 10 people here, 10 people here, and one person in the middle, that's the median. But that means half of Black America's wealth is actually going to be positive. And so what I would suggest for those that are interested in actually solving a problem as opposed to just marinating in the problem and enjoying the problem and making a whole industry out of the problem and complaining about the problem, if you actually want to solve the problem, I would encourage you to study those people who are on that end of the fence. Like, okay, how is it if it, because what that tells you is something that's not very popular for people to hear, which is that being black alone inherently is not a death sentence for your economics. There's no law ever written that says, well, all black people must have zero wealth. Every black person's got to be poor. That's a requirement. To be being black means you must be broke. No, there's no law like that. What it says is that there are some systematic variables that increase the probability of your wealth being zero if you're black. Some of those variables are systemic, like racism. We know that's real. White people stole all your money. They owe you reparations. I will never walk away from that point. Um, some of them are cultural. Like you grew up learning how to manage your money from people who maybe did not have the skill set when it came to managing money. They didn't know how to properly manage the money that they had, so they passed down toxic financial choices down to you, right? So ultimately, uh, consciousness is important because consciousness is the cure for culture. Consciousness consciousness curates culture. That would be triple C. Consciousness curates culture. How about that? And when I say it's a cure for culture, I mean it's a cure for bad culture, right? Because a lot of culture is connected to your habits. It's like, well, what do I just do every day just out of habit? Well, I get that from my culture, right? My culture tells me to turn on BET